The experiment gone wrong. Dr. Ray's laboratory was not an ordinary place. Hidden deep beneath the city, it was filled with strange machines, glowing vials, and devices that hummed softly. The air smelled of chemicals and ozone. For years, Dr. Ray had worked in secret, creating formulas to push human limits. His latest invention was his most dangerous yet, a potion designed to boost instincts and emotions. "It's not ready," he muttered, staring at the glowing blue liquid in the glass vial. The potion shimmered, as if it had a life of its own. He placed it carefully on a shelf, far away from the cluttered workstation. "Dr. Ray," called a calm, melodic voice behind him. It was Cholera, his alien assistant. She stood tall, her pale, translucent skin faintly reflecting the lab's lights. Her large, dark eyes showed curiosity but little emotion. Cholera's species, the Zenari, were known for their logic and calmness. They didn't feel emotions the way humans did. Cholera tilted her head. "You've been working on that potion for weeks. Why is it so dangerous?" Dr. Ray turned to her, wiping his hands on his lab coat. "This potion is powerful. It can amplify instincts, heighten emotions, and unlock abilities we didn't know we had. But it's unstable. If something goes wrong, it cold." He paused, searching for the right words. "It could change someone in ways we can't predict." Cholera's eyes narrowed slightly. "And you think humans are ready for this?" Dr. Ray laughed nervously. "That's why we test it. Carefully." As they spoke, a loud crash came from the other side of the lab. Startled, Dr. Ray knocked over a stack of tools, which clattered noisily to the floor. Cholera moved to help him, her graceful hands picking up the scattered equipment. But neither noticed that the vibration had shaken the shelf above them. The vial of glowing blue liquid teetered on the edge. Slowly, it tipped forward. Before Cholera could react, the vial shattered on the ground. The blue liquid splashed everywhere, some of it soaking into her skin. She froze, her eyes widening in shock. Dr. Ray turned, his face pale with horror. "No," he shouted, grabbing her arm. "Cholera, are you okay? Did it touch you?" Cholera opened her mouth to respond, but her voice caught in her throat. Her body trembled, and her breathing became uneven. The glowing blue liquid seemed to sink into her skin, disappearing as if absorbed. Her translucent veins pulsed faintly with a strange light. I feel strange," she whispered, her voice shaking for the first time. "Something's happening." Dr. Ray's mind raced. He hadn't tested the potion on any living being, let alone an alien. He grabbed a scanner and began checking her vitals. "Your heart rate is spiking," he muttered. "Adrenaline levels are off the charts. This isn't supposed to happen." Cholera took a shaky step back. Her usually calm eyes darted around the room, and her hands clenched into fists. "I feel powerful," she said, her voice almost unrecognizable. "And angry? Why am I angry?" Her sudden burst of emotion was shocking. The Zenari didn't experience feelings like humans. They were logical and composed, always in control. But now, Cholera's instincts seemed to be taking over. She looked at Dr. Ray, her gaze intense. "What have you done to me? I didn't mean for this to happen." Dr. Ray said, backing away slightly. "It was an accident. We can fix this. Just stay calm." But calm was the last thing Cholera felt. Her heightened senses overwhelmed her. The hum of the machines sounded like thunder in her ears. The fluorescent lights were blindingly bright. She gritted her teeth, trying to regain control. Then it happened. A sudden surge of energy coursed through her body. Her muscles tightened, and she moved faster than she ever thought possible. She turned and grabbed a falling piece of equipment before it hit the ground, a feat that would have been impossible just moments ago. Her reflexes were no longer her own. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Why am I acting like this?" Dr. Ray stared at her, both amazed and terrified. "It's the potion. It's rewriting your instincts. It's making you act human. Calera's breathing slowed as she processed his words, but before she could respond, the lab's alarm system blared. A deep mechanical voice echoed through the room. Unauthorized biological activity detected. Containment breach imminent. Dr. Ray's face went pale. They know, he whispered. The lab's security system detected your changes. If they find out what happened, they'll come for you. Calera's newly sharpened instincts kicked in. Then we must leave. Now. Dr. Ray hesitated, looking at her glowing veins and intense eyes. The Calera he knew was gone, or at least changed. He didn't know if he could trust her anymore, but he had no choice. Let's go, he said, grabbing a small bag of supplies. We'll figure this out. I promise. Calera nodded, her logical mind fighting to regain control over her wild, unleashed instincts. But deep down, she felt something new stirring, a fire she couldn't extinguish, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to. As they left the lab, shadows moved in the corridors. Unknown forces were already closing in. Unleashed instincts. The city glimmered in the distance, its towering skyscrapers piercing the sky like jagged shards of metal. Calera sat in silence inside the speeding hovercraft, her gaze fixed on the sprawling metropolis ahead. Dr. Ray piloted the craft, his hands gripping the controls tightly, his face pale with fear. The events in the lab replayed in his mind like a broken record. He glanced at Calera, who sat unnaturally still, her dark eyes glowing faintly under the dim cabin lights. Calera, Dr. Ray began cautiously, breaking the silence. How are you feeling now? Calera didn't respond immediately. Her fingers twitched as if testing the strength of her hands. She finally turned to him, her voice lower, almost predatory. Everything feels alive. The air, the lights, even you. I can hear your heartbeat. It's fast. Dr. Ray stiffened. That's new. Can you control it? Your instincts? I don't know. Calera's voice wavered. It's like my body knows what to do before I think. But the emotions, they're loud, like a storm inside my head. She paused, her hands clenching. Humans live like this. How do you survive? Dr. Ray sighed, unsure how to answer. We're used to it. Emotions are part of what makes us human. Calera's gaze sharpened. It feels more like a curse. The hovercraft slowed as they entered a restricted zone on the city's outskirts. Dr. Ray tapped a button, and the craft descended, landing on a hidden pad behind a row of abandoned warehouses. He turned to Calera, his voice urgent. We need to lay low here for a while. If the authorities track us, they won't. Calera interrupted. I would sense them before they get close. Her confidence was unsettling. Dr. Ray stepped out cautiously, but Calera leaped down with unnatural grace, landing silently. She scanned the darkened alleyway, her senses flaring to life. The hum of distant machinery, the faint scuttle of rodents, even the soft rustle of wind in the garbage-strewn streets, all of it was sharp and clear. We shouldn't stay here long, Calera said, her voice tense. It's too exposed. Dr. Ray frowned, watching her closely. You're different. Calera turned to him, her glowing eyes narrowing. You said the potion amplified instincts. But it's more than that. I feel things I shouldn't. Anger, fear, and something else. Something wild. She clenched her fists, her voice dropping to a whisper. What if I can't control it? Dr. Ray opened his mouth to reassure her, but a loud crash interrupted him. From one of the nearby alleys, a scream rang out. Calera's head snapped toward the sound, her body tensing like a predator ready to pounce. Stay here, Dr. Ray hissed. It's too dangerous. But Calera was already moving. Her enhanced instincts took over, and she sprinted into the darkness, her movements impossibly fast. Dr. Ray cursed under his breath and followed, though he knew he couldn't keep up. Calera rounded the corner to find a group of armed men surrounding a young woman. The thugs sneered, their weapons glinting under the faint glow of a flickering streetlight. The woman cowered, clutching a small bag as one of the men grabbed her arm. "Please," the woman cried. "I don't have anything else." Calira didn't hesitate. Her body moved on its own, a blur of speed and precision. Before the thugs could react, she grabbed the closest one by the arm and flung him across the alley. He hit the wall with a sickening thud and crumpled to the ground, unconscious. The others turned, stunned by the sudden attack. "What the?" Calira's fist connected with another thug's jaw, sending him sprawling. She dodged a swing from a metal pipe, her reflexes far beyond human. Grabbing the pipe mid-swing, she yanked it away and snapped it in half like a twig. The last thug dropped his weapon and ran, his footsteps echoing down the alley. The young woman stared in disbelief as Calira stood over the unconscious men, her glowing eyes narrowing. "Are you hurt?" Calira asked, her voice cold but steady. The woman shook her head, her lips trembling. "And no, thank you." Calira nodded, but her hands trembled slightly. The rush of adrenaline was intoxicating, but the rage burning inside her was unsettling. She turned as Dr. Ray finally caught up, panting heavily. "What did you do?" he asked, horrified as he saw the unconscious men. "They were attacking me," Calira said simply. "I stopped them." Dr. Ray stared at her, unsure whether to feel relieved or terrified. "You didn't just stop them, you overwhelmed them. Do you realize how dangerous that is?" Calira's glowing eyes softened for a moment, and she looked at her trembling hands. "I didn't think, I just acted. That's what I'm afraid of," Dr. Ray muttered. "Your instincts are taking over. We need to figure out how to reverse this before it gets worse." Calira didn't respond. She glanced at the young woman, who had already flowed into the night, and then back at Dr. Ray. "If this is what humans call instincts," she said quietly, "then maybe humans are more dangerous than I thought." As they returned to the warehouse, Calira's senses remained on high alert. Every sound, every shadow seemed like a threat. She knew she was changing, becoming something new, something powerful. But deep down, she wondered, was this an evolution or a curse? From the shadows of a nearby rooftop, a figure watched them silently. Their communicator buzzed softly. "Target acquired," they whispered. "Prepare for extraction." The chase. The city was alive with chaos, its neon lights and crowded streets hiding the dangers lurking in every shadow. Calira moved through the bustling market district with fluid precision, her sharp senses catching every detail: the smell of roasted meats, the distant hum of a drone overhead, and the nervous whispers of people avoiding her path. Dr. Ray struggled to keep up, his heart pounding as he glanced over his shoulder. "They're following us," he said breathlessly. "I can feel it." Calira didn't slow down. "No, you can't feel it," she replied coldly, her voice low. "I can. 3 agents, 2 blocks behind, 1 on the rooftops." Dr. Ray's stomach sank. "How do you know that?" Calira glanced at him, her glowing eyes narrowing. "The potion heightened more than my instincts. I can sense things, vibrations in the air, heartbeats. They're closing in." Dr. Ray cursed under his breath. "We have to lose them." Calira scanned the area quickly. The market district was a labyrinth of stalls, hanging banners, and narrow alleys. Perfect for an ambush or an escape. "Follow me," she said, grabbing his arm and pulling him into a side alley. The agents moved silently, their dark suits blending into the shadows. They carried advanced tracking equipment, but even the most sophisticated technology couldn't keep up with Calira's newfound abilities. One of them stopped, checking a handheld scanner. "They're close," the lead agent said, his voice sharp and mechanical through a comms device. "Alpha Team, cut them off at the next intersection." From their position on the rooftop, another agent tracked Calira and Dr. Ray through a scope. "Target is moving fast. Faster than expected. Permission to engage." "Negative." The lead agent replied, "We need her alive." Calira led Dr. Ray through a maze of alleys, her enhanced senses guiding them like a compass. They ducked through narrow passageways, climbed over abandoned crates, and slipped into the shadows whenever they heard approaching footsteps. But the agents were relentless. "Calira," Dr. Ray whispered, his voice shaky. "They're going to catch us. We need tow." "They won't catch us," Calira interrupted, her tone firm. "Not if you keep quiet and follow my lead." Dr. Ray wanted to argue, but he knew better. Calira wasn't just his assistant anymore. She had become something else, something far beyond his understanding. As they rounded another corner, Calira suddenly stopped, holding up a hand. "Wait." Dr. Ray froze, his breathing ragged. "What is it?" Calira's eyes flicked upward, her pupils narrowing like a predator's. "Rooftops. They're moving ahead to block us. We can't keep running." "What do you mean?" "We have to," Dr. Ray hissed. Calira shook her head. "No, it's time to fight." Before Dr. Ray could protest, Calira sprang into action. She leaped onto a nearby stack of crates with inhuman speed, launching herself toward the rooftop. The agent perched above barely had time to react before she tackled him, sending his weapon clattering to the ground. With a single, swift motion, she disarmed him and rendered him unconscious. Dr. Ray stared up in disbelief as Calira moved with calculated precision. She seemed almost predatory. "Calira, what are you doing? We need to escape, not make more enemies." "There already are enemies," Calira replied, her voice steady as she scanned the area. "And if we don't stop them now, they'll keep hunting us." On the ground, the remaining agents closed in. Two approached Dr. Ray, their weapons raised. "Hands up," one of them barked. "Don't move." Dr. Ray froze, his hands trembling in the air. But before the agents could take another step, Calira dropped down from the rooftop, landing silently behind them. With blinding speed, she struck, disarming one agent and using his own weapon to disable the other. The fight was over in seconds. Dr. Ray stared at her, his mouth agape. What are you?" Calira's glowing eyes met his, a flicker of something unrecognizable in her gaze. "I don't know," she admitted, "but whatever I am, I'm starting to understand it." The agents regrouped, their leader barking orders into his comms. "Team Bravo, converge on my location. Target is more dangerous than anticipated." Calira pulled Dr. Ray into another alley, her movements sharp and deliberate. "We need to keep moving. They'll send reinforcements." Dr. Ray stumbled after her, his mind racing. "This isn't sustainable. You can't fight them all." Calira didn't respond immediately. She led him to an abandoned warehouse, pushing open a rusted door and gesturing for him to enter. Once inside, she turned to face him. "You're right," she said finally. "I can't fight them all. But I can outsmart them." Dr. Ray frowned. "How?" Calira paced the room, her glowing veins pulsating faintly. "They're tracking me, my biosignature, my movements. But if I can disrupt their equipment, they'll lose me." Dr. Ray rubbed his temples. "And how do you plan to do that?" Calira smirked, a hint of human emotion flickering across her face. "You're the genius scientist. Figure it out." Before Dr. Ray could argue, the sound of approaching drones filled the air. Calira's expression hardened. "They're here." The next few minutes were a blur. Calira moved like a shadow, disabling drones and evading detection with an ease that terrified and amazed Dr. Ray. He scrambled to set up a makeshift EMP device using parts from his bag, his hands shaking as he worked. "Hurry," Calira urged, her voice low. "They're closing in." "I'm trying." Dr. Ray snapped, sweat dripping down his face. This isn't exactly a standard field operation. Finally, the device hummed to life. Dr. Ray activated it, sending a pulse of energy through the warehouse. The drones outside sputtered and fell from the sky, their lights flickering out. Calira nodded approvingly. "That'll buy us some time." Dr. Ray slumped against the wall, his breathing heavy. Time for what? Kalira's gaze hardened. To figure out who's hunting us. And why. From the shadows outside, the lead agent watched the warehouse through binoculars. He lowered them slowly, his expression grim. They're more resourceful than we thought, he muttered into his comms, requesting permission to escalate. A cold voice replied from the other end. Permission granted. Bring her in, dead or alive. The chase was far from over. The betrayal. The safe house was quiet, too quiet. Hidden deep in the industrial zone, it was a decrepit building forgotten by the city's authorities. The air smelled of rust and mildew, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed through the empty halls. Dr. Ray paced nervously, his eyes darting to the boarded-up windows. Kalira sat cross-legged in the corner, her glowing eyes half closed as if meditating, though the tension in her shoulders betrayed her alertness. We can't stay here forever, Dr. Ray muttered, breaking the silence. They'll find us. They'd always do. Kalira opened her eyes, her gaze sharp and predatory. Then we'll deal with them when they come. Her calm tone unsettled Dr. Ray. She had changed so much in just a few days. The logical, composed Kalira he once knew was gone, replaced by someone, or something, more primal, more dangerous. Before he could respond, the faint buzz of a communicator startled them both. Dr. Ray reached into his pocket, pulling out the small device. The screen flashed with a message. "It's Jonah," he said, relief flooding his voice. "My old colleague. He's offering us help." Kalira's eyes narrowed. Help? Or a trap? Dr. Ray shook his head. Jonah's been on the run from the government for years. He knows how to avoid them. If anyone can get us out of this, it's him. Kalira studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she stood. "If you trust him, I'll go. But if this goes wrong," her glowing veins pulsed faintly, "I won't hesitate to protect myself." They met Jonah in an abandoned rail yard at the edge of the city. The air was cold, and the ground was littered with rusting train cars and overgrown weeds. Jonah stepped out from behind a metal container, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. He was a wiry man with unkempt hair and a nervous smile. "Ray," Jonah said, his voice warm despite the tension. "It's been a long time." Dr. Ray smiled back, though his relief was tinged with exhaustion. "Too long. Thanks for coming." Jonah's gaze shifted to Kalira, and his smile faltered. "And this must be the assistant you mentioned." Kalira's glowing eyes locked onto him, and Jonah flinched slightly. "I prefer Kalira," she said, her voice cold. "Right," Jonah said, nodding quickly. "Kalira. Well, let's not waste time. I've secured a safe passage out of the city, but we need to move fast. They're closing in." The trio moved through the rail yard, Jonah leading the way. He spoke in hurried whispers, explaining how he had intercepted government communications and created false trails to confuse their pursuers. Dr. Ray listened intently, his hope growing with every word. Kalira, however, remained silent, her senses on high alert. Something didn't feel right. As they approached a hidden transport vehicle, Kalira stopped abruptly. Her sharp eyes scanned the shadows, her glowing veins pulsing faintly. "Wait." Jonah turned, frowning. "What's wrong?" Kalira's voice was low and tense. "We're not alone." Dr. Ray looked around nervously. "What do you mean?" "I don't see." Before he could finish, a deafening bang echoed through the rail yard. Smoke grenades exploded around them, filling the air with a thick, choking fog. Kalira reacted instantly, grabbing Dr. Ray and shoving him behind a pile of crates. "Ambush," she hissed. Jonah stumbled back, coughing as shadowy figures emerged from the smoke. Agents in tactical gear, their weapons drawn, surrounded them. One of them stepped forward, his helmet reflecting the faint moonlight. "Good work, Jonah," the agent said, his voice cold and mechanical. Dr. Ray's eyes widened in shock. "Jonah, what is this? What have you done?" Jonah's face twisted with guilt, but he didn't meet Dr. Ray's gaze. "I didn't have a choice," he said, his voice trembling. "They found me. They said they'd let me go if I turned you in." "You betrayed us," Kalira said, her tone deadly calm. Her glowing eyes burned with fury. "You led them straight to us." Jonah took a step back, his hands raised defensively. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted." Kalira didn't let him finish. In a blur of motion, she was on him, pinning him to the ground. Her strength was terrifying, and for a moment, Jonah looked genuinely afraid. "You don't get to justify this," she growled, her voice filled with a dangerous edge. "Kalira," Dr. Ray shouted, stepping forward. "Stop. We don't have time for this." Kalira hesitated, her glowing veins pulsing as her instincts wrestled with her logic. Finally, she released Jonah, who scrambled away, his face pale with fear. The agents moved closer, their weapons trained on her. "Surrender," the lead agent commanded. "There's no escape." Kalira stood, her glowing eyes narrowing. "You're wrong." What followed was chaos. Kalira moved like a whirlwind, her enhanced reflexes and strength turning the tide of the ambush. She disarmed agents, dodged bullets with inhuman speed, and used her environment to her advantage. Dr. Ray watched in awe and terror as she dismantled the team with surgical precision. But even Kalira couldn't fight forever. The agents were too many, and their tactics were relentless. As more reinforcements arrived, Kalira and Dr. Ray were forced to retreat. "Come on," Dr. Ray shouted, pulling her toward the hidden transport vehicle. Kalira hesitated, her glowing eyes lingering on Jonah, who lay trembling on the ground. For a moment, it seemed like she might leave him behind. But then, with a frustrated growl, she grabbed him and hauled him to his feet. "You're coming with us," she said coldly. "You're not getting off that easy." As the vehicle sped away, Kalira sat in silence, her glowing eyes fixed on the horizon. Dr. Ray glanced at her, his heart heavy with the weight of betrayal. "Kalira," he said softly. "I'm sorry." Kalira didn't respond. She closed her eyes, her hands trembling slightly. The fire inside her burned brighter than ever, but now it was fueled by something new, something dangerous. Hatred. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. The turning point. The abandoned mining colony on the outskirts of the solar system was desolate, its towering machines long since silenced by time. Dust storms whipped through the barren wasteland, cloaking the landscape in a perpetual haze. Kalira, Dr. Ray, and Jonah arrived at the decrepit facility, their stolen transport barely holding together after the frantic escape from the city. The heavy silence of the mining complex was unnerving. Kalira stepped out first, her glowing eyes scanning the ruins. Every sound, the creak of rusted metal, the distant howl of the wind, put her on edge. Her instincts were sharper than ever, warning her that danger was close. "We'll be safe here for now," Dr. Ray said, though his voice carried little conviction. He looked at Kalira, his face drawn with exhaustion. "What do you sense?" Kalira didn't answer immediately. She moved like a shadow, her heightened senses picking up faint vibrations beneath the ground. She crouched and pressed her hand to the cold, dusty surface. Her voice was low and tense. "Something's wrong. We're not alone." Dr. Ray paled. "What? How could they have found us this fast?" Kalira stood, her glowing veins pulsing faintly. "Because they were already here." Inside the main building, the trio found signs of recent activity. Empty ration packs, scuffed floors, and equipment humming faintly to life told a story of someone, or something, making the abandoned colony their base. Jonah trailed behind, his eyes darting nervously. Kalira kept him in her peripheral vision, her trust in him non-existent after his betrayal. "Jonah," she said suddenly, her voice sharp, "what aren't you telling us?" Jonah flinched, his hands raising defensively. "Nothing. I swear, I didn't know they'd be here. I thought this place was abandoned." Kalira's glowing eyes bore into him, her enhanced instincts reading his every micro-expression. "If you're lying." "I'm not," Jonah interrupted, his voice cracking. "Please, you have to believe me. I just want to survive this." Hilara's expression didn't soften, but she turned away, her attention snapping back to the room. "Let's keep moving. Stay close." Deeper into the facility, they discovered the source of the activity, a hidden lab built into the colony's core. Dr. Ray stared in disbelief at the equipment, much of it resembling his own designs. He approached a console, his hands trembling as he scrolled through the data. "This is impossible," he murmured. "They've replicated my work. The potion, the experiments, it's all here." Kalira's gaze hardened. They've been preparing for this. Dr. Ray's fingers flew over the keyboard. They're not just replicating it. They're enhancing it. They're planning mass production. Jonah's face turned ashen. Mass production. For what? Kalira's voice was cold and steady. Soldiers, weapons, they're turning it into something they can control. Dr. Ray shook his head, his voice trembling. But they can't control it. Even Kalira, with all her discipline, struggles with the effects. If they try to use this on a large scale, it'll be chaos, Kalira finished, and millions will suffer. Suddenly, alarms blared, shattering the tense silence. Red lights bathed the room as a mechanical voice echoed through the facility. Intruders detected. Security protocols activated. Kalira's head snapped toward the entrance. "We need to move. Now." Before they could react, the doors slammed shut, trapping them inside. A harsh voice crackled over the intercom. "Well, well. Look who stumbled into our little operation." Kalira's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" The voice laughed, cold and menacing. "Just someone who appreciates the potential of your condition. You've proven quite valuable, Kalira. But now, it's time to bring you in." Dr. Ray's face twisted in horror. "They've been tracking us this whole time." Kalira didn't waste time on fear. She moved to the console, ripping open a panel and exposing a mess of wires. "Ray, can you disable this?" Dr. Ray hesitated, his hands shaking. I think so, but it'll take time." "Then start," Kalira ordered. "I'll hold them off." The doors burst open, and heavily armed agents stormed in, their weapons raised. Kalira was a blur of motion, her enhanced instincts guiding her as she disarmed the first wave with brutal efficiency. She moved like a predator, dodging bullets and striking with precision. The agents didn't stand a chance, but they kept coming. Dr. Ray worked frantically at the console, sweat pouring down his face. Jonah crouched behind a table, his hands over his head. "Hurry up," he shouted. "She can't hold them forever." Kalira fought like a force of nature, but the strain was evident. Her glowing veins pulsed erratically, and her breaths came in sharp, uneven gasps. The potion's effects were taking a toll, pushing her body to its limits. "Ray," she shouted, her voice laced with urgency. "How much longer?" "Almost there," he replied, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "Just a few more seconds." Kalira gritted her teeth, blocking a strike from an agent and countering with a devastating blow. But the reinforcements were overwhelming, and she knew she couldn't keep this up. "Done," Dr. Ray shouted. The alarms cut off, and the doors behind them slid open. "Let's go." Kalira didn't hesitate. She grabbed Dr. Ray and Jonah, dragging them toward the exit. The agents pursued, but the trio managed to slip into a maintenance tunnel, the sounds of gunfire echoing behind them. In the safety of the tunnel, Kalira leaned against the wall, her glowing veins flickering faintly. Dr. Ray moved to her side, concern etched on his face. "Kalira, are you okay?" She nodded, though her voice was weak. "I'll be fine. We have to stop them." Dr. Ray looked at her, guilt weighing heavily on him. "This is my fault. I created this. I brought you into this." Kalira's gaze softened slightly, a rare flicker of emotion crossing her face. "It doesn't matter now. What matters is what we do next. Jonah, still catching his breath, spoke up. What's the plan? How do we stop an entire operation? Hilarity straightened, her glowing eyes burning with determination. We take the fight to them. No more running. Dr. Ray hesitated, but he nodded. Then we destroy the lab. And this time, we make sure there's nothing left. As they prepared for the final confrontation, Hilarity felt a strange sense of clarity. The fire within her was no longer something to fear. It was her weapon, and she would use it to end this once and for all. The showdown. The massive compound sat nestled in a valley, surrounded by jagged cliffs and thick forests. Its steel walls glistened under the moonlight, guarded by drones patrolling the perimeter and armed sentries stationed at every entrance. The lab at the heart of the operation pulsed with activity, its tall glass panels revealing rows of scientists and technicians working tirelessly. Hilarity, Dr. Ray, and Jonah crouched on a ridge overlooking the compound. The chilling wind carried the faint hum of machinery and the occasional bark of an order. Hilarity's glowing eyes scanned the facility, her enhanced vision taking in every detail. It's heavily fortified, Dr. Ray whispered, peering through binoculars. We'll never make it past those defenses. Hilarity didn't respond immediately. Her instincts were already formulating a plan. We don't need to fight our way in, she said, her voice steady. We just need to create chaos. Jonah shivered, pulling his jacket tighter. Chaos. Against that, you've seen what they're capable of. Hilarity turned to him, her gaze cold. And they haven't seen what I'm capable of. The plan was simple but dangerous. Hilarity would create a distraction, drawing the guards and drones away from the main facility. Dr. Ray and Jonah would infiltrate the lab, disable the production systems, and retrieve the data files before destroying everything. It was risky, but it was their only chance. As they prepared, Hilarity checked the equipment they'd salvaged. A crude EMP device, a few stolen energy weapons, and a handful of makeshift explosives. She secured a small communicator to her wrist, linking her to Dr. Ray. If anything goes wrong, Dr. Ray said, his voice tight with worry, we abort. Hilarity's glowing eyes locked onto his. Nothing will go wrong. Hilarity moved like a shadow through the forest, her enhanced senses guiding her past patrols and surveillance drones. She reached the outer perimeter and planted one of the explosives near a cluster of power lines. The faint hum of electricity vibrated through the ground beneath her feet. Ray, she whispered into the communicator, ready on your signal. Dr. Ray's voice crackled in her ear. Stand by. And now. Hilarity pressed the detonator. The explosion shattered the night's silence, sending sparks and debris into the air. The power grid flickered, and the lights across the compound dimmed momentarily. As expected, the guards mobilized immediately. Alarms blared, and drones swarmed toward the explosion site. Hilarity used the chaos to her advantage, moving swiftly through the shadows and taking out isolated guards with precision strikes. Her glowing veins pulsed faintly, her instincts driving her movements like a well-honed weapon. Distraction in place, Hilarity whispered. Proceed. Inside the lab, Dr. Ray and Jonah slipped through the chaos, their stolen credentials granting them access past the initial security checkpoints. The sterile, brightly lit corridors were a stark contrast to the dark, chaotic exterior. Technicians and scientists rushed about, trying to stabilize the systems affected by the explosion. This way, Dr. Ray said, leading Jonah to a control room. The servers containing the formula's data were housed here, guarded by reinforced doors and armed personnel. Jonah hesitated, glancing nervously at the guards. How are we supposed to get in there? Dr. Ray pulled out a device from his bag, his hands trembling slightly. This jammer should disable their comms and sensors long enough for us to get through. Just keep watch. As Dr. Ray worked, Jonah's gaze shifted to a nearby monitor displaying surveillance footage. He spotted Hilarity, a blur of motion as she took down a squad of guards near the compound's perimeter. She's insane, he muttered under his breath. She's saving our lives, Dr. Ray snapped, not looking up. Focus. Kalira's assault intensified as she moved deeper into the compound. Her glowing veins pulsed brighter, the effects of the potion pushing her body to its limits. She knew she was being reckless, but there was no room for hesitation. Every guard she disabled, every drone she destroyed, brought them closer to victory. "Ray," she said into the communicator, her voice strained. "How much longer?" "We're almost there," he replied. "Just hold them off a little longer." Kalira gritted her teeth. The potion's effects were taking their toll. Her muscles ached, and her vision blurred slightly. But she pushed through the pain. This had to end. In the control room, Dr. Ray successfully bypassed the security protocols and accessed the servers. Lines of code scrolled across the monitor as he began copying the data. "Got it," he said, relief flooding his voice. "Now let's shut this place down." Jonah handed him one of the explosives, his hand shaking. "Are you sure this will work?" "It has to," Dr. Ray replied. He set the timer and placed the explosive near the server core. "We have 5 minutes. Let's go." As the two fled the control room, Kalira's voice crackled through the communicator. "They're bringing reinforcements. You need to move faster." "We're on our way out," Dr. Ray replied. "What about you?" Kalira didn't answer immediately. She was surrounded, dozens of guards converging on her position. She had pushed herself too far, and her enhanced abilities were beginning to falter. "I'll meet you at the extraction point," she said finally, though even she wasn't sure if she could make it. The final moments were a blur. The explosion ripped through the compound, sending shockwaves that toppled walls and shattered glass. Dr. Ray and Jonah barely escaped the blast radius, diving behind cover as debris rained down around them. But Kalira was still inside. "Kalira," Dr. Ray shouted into the communicator, his voice desperate. "Are you there?" Silence. Seconds felt like hours as Dr. Ray and Jonah scanned the wreckage, searching for any sign of her. Just when they were about to give up, a shadow emerged from the smoke. Kalira stumbled forward, her glowing veins dim and her movements unsteady. She was battered and bruised, but alive. Dr. Ray rushed to her side, relief flooding his face. "You made it." Kalira managed a faint smile. "Told you nothing would go wrong." As the three of them fled into the night, the smoldering ruins of the compound behind them, Kalira felt a strange sense of peace. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, she felt like she had taken control of the fire burning inside her, and she wasn't done fighting yet. A new beginning. The shuttle hummed quietly as it sailed through the endless black of space. Kalira sat near the viewport, her glowing eyes reflecting the distant stars. She was silent, her usually sharp gaze distant, almost contemplative. The scars of the battle were still visible on her skin, scratches, burns, and bruises. But her glowing veins pulsed faintly, a reminder of the fire that still burned within her. Behind her, Dr. Ray worked feverishly at a console, transferring the stolen data from the lab into a secured server. Jonah sat slumped in a corner, his face pale and drawn. He had been unusually quiet since their escape, the weight of his betrayal still heavy in the air. The silence in the shuttle was broken only by the soft beeps of the console and the occasional hiss of the life support system. It felt surreal. After all the chaos and destruction, the quiet seemed almost deafening. "We did it," Dr. Ray said finally, his voice breaking the stillness. "The lab is gone. The formula is destroyed. They won't be able to replicate it again." Kalira didn't turn from the viewport. Her voice was calm but heavy with exhaustion. "For now." Dr. Ray frowned, his hands pausing over the keyboard. "What do you mean?" Kalira turned to face him, her glowing eyes piercing. The formula wasn't the only problem. It was the people behind it, the ones who saw it as a weapon, as a tool for control. They'll try again. Maybe not with your formula, but with something else. Dr. Ray sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I know, but at least we've delayed them." Maybe that's enough. Kalira's gaze softened slightly. It's a start. The shuttle docked at a hidden station orbiting a gas giant, its massive rings casting an eerie glow over the structure. The station was a haven for outcasts and rebels, a place where no government dared to tread. Kalira, Dr. Ray, and Jonah disembarked, their footsteps echoing through the dimly lit corridors. Inside, the station bustled with life. Merchants peddled stolen goods, mechanics worked on battered ships, and travelers from across the galaxy exchanged whispered conversations. The air was thick with the smell of fuel and spice, a chaotic mix of desperation and hope. Dr. Ray led the group to a small, private room in the station's lower levels. Once inside, he activated a security device that filled the room with a soft, shimmering fuel of light. "This will block any surveillance," he explained. Jonah sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "So what now?" he asked, his voice hollow. "We can't just hide forever. They'll find us eventually." Kalira leaned against the wall, her arms crossed. "We're not hiding," she said firmly. "We're planning." Dr. Ray looked at her, his brow furrowed. "Planning what?" Kalira's glowing eyes met his. "To fight back. They're not just after me. They're after control. Of people, of species, of entire worlds. We have to stop them." Dr. Ray hesitated. "Kalira, we're scientists, not soldiers. How are we supposed to take on an organization that powerful?" Kalira pushed off the wall, her posture confident. "We don't need an army. We just need to be smarter than them. Find their weaknesses, expose their plans, and take them down piece by piece." Jonah looked up, his eyes filled with doubt. "And what if we fail?" Kalira's voice was steady. "Then we fail fighting for something that matters." Over the next few days, the trio worked tirelessly. Dr. Ray analyzed the data they'd taken from the lab, uncovering clues about the organization's network and key players. Jonah, despite his earlier cowardice, proved to be a skilled hacker, breaking into encrypted systems and gathering valuable intel. Kalira, meanwhile, trained relentlessly, pushing her enhanced body to its limits. The station became their base of operations, a place to regroup and strategize. Word of their actions began to spread, attracting others who had suffered under the shadow of the organization. Mercenaries, informants, and even former scientists came to them, offering their skills and knowledge. Kalira emerged as their leader, her unwavering determination and newfound emotional depth inspiring those around her. She was no longer just an assistant or an experiment. She was a force of nature, a symbol of resistance. One night, as the station's artificial lights dimmed for the simulated night cycle, Dr. Ray found Kalira on the observation deck. She stood alone, staring out at the gas giant's swirling storms. "Can't sleep?" he asked, stepping up beside her. Kalira shook her head. "I don't think I'll ever sleep the same again." Dr. Ray was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. "You've changed." Kalira glanced at him, a faint smile playing on her lips. "So have you." Dr. Ray chuckled. "Fair enough. But seriously, what's next for you?" Kalira's smile faded, replaced by a determined expression. "I don't know what I'll become, Ray. This fire inside me, it's still there. But I've learned to control it, to use it." She turned to him, her glowing eyes steady. "I'm not just fighting for myself anymore. I'm fighting for everyone they've hurt, and everyone they might hurt in the future." Dr. Ray nodded, his chest swelling with a mix of pride and sadness. "You're stronger than I ever imagined." Kalira looked back at the swirling storms. "I just hope it's enough." As the station prepared for its next cycle, the trio stood together in the central hub, surrounded by their growing network of allies. The fight ahead would be long and dangerous, but they were ready. Kalira raised her voice, her glowing eyes sweeping over the crowd. "We're not just survivors. We're not just rebels. We're the spark that will burn them down." The room erupted in cheers, the sound reverberating through the station. In that moment, Kalira knew she had found her purpose, not as a pawn or a weapon, but as a force for change. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, Cholera felt truly alive. And she wasn't afraid of the fire anymore.